We have been treated to some of the best comic book films ever made that came from DC Comics. Whether that was the classic 1978 Superman, Nolan's The Dark Knight, but definitely not Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern. However, in the modern day world, as far as last decade, instead of being the trendsetters themselves, they instead pivoted alongside with their superiors over at Warner Bros. To follow what Marvel was doing with their MCU, and instead decided to form their own cinematic universe with their own characters. And while that entire story will take multiple amounts of these opening segments to tell that long story, it just did not end well that first take of a shared universe for DC, and the reboot button was eventually hit, leading us to this moment right now. The last film in this first attempt, which I'm surprised that we even got it, in my opinion at least, is the sequel to Aquaman. Despite the fact there even is a film with the name Aquaman, let alone two of them, that first one actually made a lot of money. Now, removing the financial component here, the question remains is, was this movie a worthy send-off for the DCEU? This is after the theater for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. When you think of DC Comics, you think of the Holy Trinity first. Not that one. The one of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Occasionally you get The Flash, Green Lantern, but Aquaman just never got that credibility before that first film came around. Sure, he popped up in the animated projects, he was portrayed by Alan Richard in Smallville, and he nearly got his own TV show starring Justin Hartley. But by the time Warner Bros. Was pushing Zack Snyder's Man of Steel to become the launching point for the DCEU, the opportunity became real for Aquaman to be elevated to the next level. Still, a film named Aquaman felt like a little bit like, I just can't believe this film would even exist. Especially when they announced that Jason Momoa was going to play the character sans the blonde hair. Zack Snyder and his out-of-box casting for you. However, after a good performance in Justice League, yes, even the 2017 version, and with James Wan behind the helm to kick off the post-Snyder era of the DCEU, surprisingly that film made over $1.3 billion. The highest grossing DC property in film ever. Higher than a film starring both Superman and Batman, arguably two of the most popular superheroes on the planet. Yeah, that is true, and not surprisingly, Warner Bros. Was ready to make that sequel happen. But similar to The Flash, which we talked about last time, studio leadership changes, mandate switches, and overall just the entire flux of the DCU post The Flash just kept delaying and delaying this film to the point where we wondered, was this film even going to be released? Eventually, it did finally come out, and with the exact same team as last time, the film came out just in time for Christmas of 2023, only in theaters. The film kicks off 4 years after the events of the last movie, with a recap to show what Arthur's been up to since reclaiming the throne at the end of the last adventure. Besides being criticized by Peacemaker, he got married to Mera, got the mom and dad he always wanted, and has become a father to a little baby boy named Arthur Jr. Oh, and he's still the King of Atlantis. Whenever he shows up, at least. It seems like things are finally on the upward path for him until his old adversary Black Manta returns with his own trident and power to take his revenge on Arthur and destroy all that he holds dear. To be frank with you, it's been a while since we've seen a personal vendetta be the conflict for a DC film in such a long time. Usually it's just something to do with changing the world, ending the world, or anything of that sort. Oh wait, there's an ancient evil hidden in a lost kingdom that is also threatening to be unleashed? I'll take 50% of it then. I kind of wish we didn't have that, since it felt like at times Black Manta was only motivated by the power of Kordak, the ancient evil. While there were lines focusing that he's only using it to gain the upper hand to Aquaman in battle, I felt like the additional backstory to create the larger scale threat wasn't really needed. A great personal motivation is enough to carry the whole movie, something that this recent wave of films didn't really want to get fully behind. What was brought behind is just allowing Jason Momoa to run with the character with Aquaman, more being himself, but still bringing the qualities of the character to him. Meaning that this go around, I see even more Momoa's personal self in Aquaman, which I can't see working since by this point, now 3 starring films in, he's kind of just earned to be whatever the character can be at his own interpretation. He's having fun with it, and at times I do enjoy the simplicity of it. Plus, dealing with the balance of being a king and a father is shown through on terms of what he's trying to get through in this adventure. It's not always on focus, but when it does, it's felt. Orm is on a different path compared to Arthur. Being the villain in the last movie comes with another angle to explore. The last movie was more of a different ideology between the two heirs. However, it was painted more like your traditional good versus evil rather than the gray method, meaning both sides are right, but one is a bit more too far than the other. This film paints that previous conflict in the latter now. Despite their differences in the last movie, at least for Arthur, he still sees a chance that he could have the brother he always wanted. While for Orm, his story is more about accepting change, having to deal with his current predicament and realizing he has to evolve and accept to what this new world is. I honestly did enjoy the story of brothers for this go around. Momoa and Wilson do make for a great on-screen pairing and grapple a story that hooked me in. Black Manta felt like we were so close to getting a really amazing villain. The personal revenge was there, the planning, the feel that this wasn't about ending the world, but ending Arthur's world. That was my hope going into this film. Personally, him having his own trident would have been a little bit more like the hero versus the evil version of himself in terms of the fight style, but it would have been a bit cooler to just leave it there. The whole added backstory just to have the bigger name for the film title and the lore around it was a bit unneeded. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II does bring a bit more to the role this go around, because I do feel his anger and his personal vendetta against Aquaman here. The fact alone that he had dedicated nearly 5 years into his revenge plan and showcased his intuition and strategy to beat him was impressive enough to say the least. Just to say for the last time, I had really wished the Lost Kingdom power wasn't behind him and he could have been fully himself. Going to the supporting cast now, I was shocked, yet not really shocked over last film's featured character Mera getting very little screen time this go around. Now, I won't bring up any of the outside stuff here because we're just reviewing the film for what it is, but it just feels like they use a little bit of every single obvious method to get her in this film with the least amount of impact possible. I know there is probably an explanation to everything one could say why she's not in an obvious scene, however, let's just chalk it up to simplifying the story by this point. As for the others, such as Atlanta, Neris, and Thomas, they were just there to keep the story moving and to be there for Arthur. Again, just simplifying the story, and that's not really a bad thing. There is only so much runtime and pacing to tell a story properly, so rather use it to sell Arthur and Orm's story together, rather than give everyone else something to really do. But even the little nuanced moments, such as Neris learning to fully trust Orm, Atlanta and Thomas still in love with each other, and Dr. Shim believingly learning that what he's doing is wrong, is all simple moments that we don't really need a lot of exposition into. I was in the camp that the ending fight scene for the first Aquaman was one of the best I've ever seen for a comic book film. And it mostly holds up again in this one, with most of the final fight between Aquaman and Black Manta. Even the fight earlier with Arthur and Orm fighting off Manta's troops was a really well done scene. The cinematography, something I don't often bring up, does at least do something that I don't see often, and it does keep me engaged. The CGI, which again, being an underwater scene heavy movie, does have to be mentioned, and I do think the delays did help in make it more believable than it can be. Some things withstanding, but still a great visual. And I do appreciate the amount of actual set pieces they do use here instead of just CGIing, even if they have a reasonable excuse to do it here. Back to the ending, it wasn't the best. It felt more like a rushed job where the real final villain was just defeated in one shot, a bit too long of a final moment between Arthur and Orm, and just mostly straight up forgetfulness of the Counts of Atlantis, which was supposed to have a bigger presence in this film, but they really didn't. And that final parallel to I Am Iron Man with Aquaman was honestly a perfect example of a mixed bag. It's cringy, but it fits well with the character. Plus, shout out to all the people hoping for one more cool final post-credit scene of the DCEU, turning out to be Orm eating a cockroach. Yep, that's all, folks. DC in film has been in a bit of a slouch now for years when it comes to its box office returns. Excluding Matt Reeves' The Batman, every film since 2019's Joker has failed to recoup its box office budget, including this one. Despite it probably being the most successful film in the DCU since its own predecessor, the film's performance just wasn't enough to convince the new DC bosses to keep Jason Momoa going as Aquaman. But I wouldn't count him out of DC just quite yet, personally speaking. However, for this film, I thought it had a good personal story with some cool fight scenes and a general through-line sense. And while I didn't get to see this film in theaters, I don't regret watching it, and I do look forward to whatever the new Aquaman looks like in the DCU in the future. With that said, I give this film 3.5 out of 5 stars and my own personal ranking of a medium popcorn with a soda. Let me know down below, what did you think of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom? Did you love it? Did you hate it? I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Would love to have a conversation with you about it. This has been Joe here from ActionX. Thank you so much for watching this episode of After the Theater. Please subscribe to see more videos such as this one. Please like, favorite, share this episode if you want to. Ring that bell. And of course, follow us on social media. But until we see each other again, thank you so much again. Please stay safe out there. Be good to each other. And as always, peace out.